Hello and welcome to Eclectic Book Diary. Today's video is going to be a review of a new book release, which is Star Eater by Kerstin Hall. Star Eater is a debut novel and it is expected to be published on June 22nd, so by the time you're watching this, it should be already available. So I got an early access to the audio version of this book and I listened to it and finished it in the last couple of days. Now, this review will be spoiler-free for the most part and it will be sectioned to mainly 3 parts. The first one will be a general and hopefully brief description of the story, and the second part will be for my likes and dislikes, and the third part will be for rating and of course my final thoughts. So let's start with a small description about this book. So Star Eater is described as a sci-fi-ish fantasy story with plenty of horror elements. We're talking about body horror, specifically cannibalism, and there is a hint of mystery and suspense. Now, of course, if body horror makes you feel uneasy or triggers you in any way, I think it's safe to say that this book is not meant for you and you better stay away from it. Anyway, in this book we follow the journey of Elfrida, who is a bard of the sisterhood that actually kind of controls the government in this sort of city/island that is called Ethereum. So they worship the Star Eater, who is the original one who ate a star and obtained its power and basically raised the city into the sky. They also have this special power within them. They call it lace weaving, and they need to maintain certain rituals to actually keep the bloodline going. Now, I don't want to talk further about this specific thing, of course, to avoid potential spoilers, so let's move on. We have also the hunt, which is kind of this lurking danger in a form of monsters. So we see Elfrida trying to kind of escape the sisterhood, and we see her also suffer from what seems like hallucinations. So she's basically trying to find a way to get out of this sisterhood thing, but also while also dealing with her own inner struggles. Moving on to what I liked and disliked about this book. From the start, I was gripped by these horror elements, the mysterious world vibes, the potential political conspiracy situation. All of that was super interesting to me. So we start out with the book on a very strong note, and moving down the line of these things, I was specifically intrigued by the way Elfrida's hallucinations were described. I felt that those specific moments were particularly intriguing. They were I could feel her agony. I could feel how scared she was, how overwhelmed she felt. So that was overall done in a very convincing way, at least for me. But I think what I liked the most about this story, or in this specific book, was the discussion around the, let's call it, freedom of choice, specifically around the female body and the importance and implications of choice and ownership of our own body. I quite enjoyed that representation. I consider that to be the highlight of this book. For things I didn't like, the world building comes right on top. Now, for me personally, as I initially liked the world that we were getting in, I really wanted to know more about this world, and I was super excited to get into like the details and seeing the world being literally built up in front of my eyes, and that didn't happen. And I found the world building to be quite an issue for me throughout this book. We get a little bit of more or further description of this world at the end of the book, but it wasn't even enough. Like, even with that, things were still lacking, in my opinion. So the world building is not as I would like things to be in that realm. Maybe someone else may disagree. Maybe you don't care that much about like that aspect of the book, but for me personally, it didn't sit well with me when it comes to that particular element. It really didn't deliver what I look for in that specific realm. Another point will be the characters themselves. Now, I mentioned before that I really enjoyed those moments where like we were able to actually feel Elfrida's like fear and overwhelming through the description of these like hallucination things. So at those moments I was really gripped by Elfrida's feelings, but other than that, I felt kind of not that connected. I felt that the characters in general, not just Elfrida, but in general, the side characters weren't that interesting. We didn't know that much about them. I wasn't capable of really like being immersed through the characters, and at the same time, I wasn't really that happy with the world building either. So things were like not as I hoped them to be. I wouldn't say that I didn't enjoy my time overall, but I would say that these elements were very much lacking, to say the least. And I would mention, like, maybe in my final thoughts, I would mention another not so positive point that regard the ending. I don't want to mention anything right now because I want to finish my thoughts here without spoiling anything. So hopefully this didn't spoil anything for you. But in general, I would say the main issue for me in this book was the world building. But as a secondary thing that I didn't care for, or I didn't feel as a strong point for this book, would be the characters themselves. They were not that interesting for me, and this could be just a personal thing. I didn't feel that interested and that intrigued by the characters. I honestly was more intrigued by the world, which I didn't get the chance to actually explore that much. So now, after all of this, let's just talk about the rating and my overall conclusion and my final thoughts about this specific book. Okay, so for the rating of this book, if I have to rely only on like the critical aspect of the book, I might give this book a low rating. But I think that overall I ended up thinking about this book, and the book like stayed in my head, whether it was like for a positive reason or for a negative reason. Regardless of those, I felt that the book achieved something by sticking in my head. But I actually ended up giving this book, in my brain at least, about 3 stars. So 3 out of 5 stars. And the reason for that would be that regardless of the fact that I had like very critical issues with this book, specifically, like, as I said, with the world building and with the character issues, I still ended up enjoying the story overall. I think the fact that I've listened to the audio version which by the way was amazing. I think the narrator did a great job, and I think because of that I ended up enjoying my time more. I think if I were to read the book as like text version and like just like as a physical book, I wouldn't have enjoyed the book as much. And overall also there were some great concepts being introduced into the book. There were like a lot of moments where I was feeling quite positive about this book, even though in the background there were a lot of things that I didn't enjoy. I like to build my rating over the joy and how much fun that I had while reading the book. So overall it's a medium rating, so it's 3 stars. It's not bad, like 3 stars for me, it's not actually bad. I think like 4 stars is potentially very good. 3 stars is like I liked things and I disliked things and I'm feeling a little bit conflicted, but I still like have a little bit more positive experience than a negative one. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but that is the overall sentiment of the rating and my overall thoughts over this book. I still think that it's a book that is worth reading for at least for the interesting concepts and the good representation overall in the book. I think that the book kind of deserves a read. So if you are interested in it, I would say go for it, unless of course, as I mentioned in the beginning, you have anything that could trigger you when it comes to body horror, because this involves a lot of disturbing and kind of disgusting scenes. Let's keep it at that. It will not make you feel at ease at all, especially those like horror scenes, but if you can handle those stuff, if it doesn't really trigger you, I think it is worth to give a try. So don't think that if someone give a mediocre rating for a book, that means it is potentially not worth reading, because as I said, we might have different views onto what is good and what is not that good. Anyway, so yeah, that basically sums up my overall thoughts about this specific book. I still have one more thing to say about the ending of this book. This is a new release, so I don't want to potentially spoil anything, but I still want to talk about this specific point. So you can click off the video right now and maybe return to it once you have read it. Unless you don't want to read the book, then of course you can keep on watching. But if you don't want things to be spoiled, just like click out of the video right now. I wouldn't be mentioning any actual like scenes from the book or actual events, but I think that just me mentioning vaguely what would happen in the end, it will still be a major spoiler. So things at the end, we have like a very intense situation. Things are building up to the point you feel like things were gonna explode, and then suddenly things kind of fell flat. And I don't know, I felt really conflicted. I think the ending was the most confusing thing in the book for me, at least. It felt that there were a lot of information given, but at the same time I wasn't really getting like the actual like useful information that I could like proceed by. I don't know, it felt a little bit weird. I think the time jump at the end was also something that threw me off. I'm not the writer, so I'm not gonna sit here and say that this could have been written in a different way. The writer has the right to end their story in whatever way they feel fit, but that's how I felt. I felt confused, so I think that contributed also to the fact that I gave this book only 3 stars. Like it sealed the deal over like how I would rate this book. But as I said, in general, it is still worth reading for the uniqueness of the concept of this book, and also for some specific representation throughout the book. I feel that the book is still something that can be enjoyed, and overall I'm just sharing my own personal experience at the end, so this is very subjective. I know for a fact that maybe some of the things that I mentioned as like negatives or the things that I actually didn't like, maybe they wouldn't be that important for you, and maybe the ending itself would be an actual like winner for some people. Who knows? For me personally, those were my thoughts. I was supposed to make a short review about this, but I ended up speaking for too long. Thank you so much if you have watched until the end. I hope you had like a informative experience with this video. So yeah, that's the end. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I also hope you will join me on the next one. Until then, take care. Bye bye.